Today I'm going to show you how to do the bokeh effect in watercolors. I'll explain what it is and a couple of ways to do it. And by the end of this video, you will be able to create this gorgeous, awesome effect in your watercolor paintings easily. We'll go over all the materials you'll need, the techniques to do it, and the pros and cons to each one. Okay, so what exactly is the bokeh effect? Well, for starters, I'm not even sure I'm saying it right. And it's actually kind of funny because the way I say it, bokeh, sounds like mouth in Portuguese. So there you go. In Japanese though, the original language of it, it means blur. Now this is something you see quite often in painting, but also in photography. And it's when you have those out of focus or blurred bits in the background. It's usually these blurred spots of light that are lighter than the remaining background, like these very diffused lighter circles. I've actually done one painting for Christmas that you guys loved that featured bokeh, and it was quite magical. You know, those Christmassy blurred lights in the background were really something. And there are many different ways to achieve this effect, some more effective than others in my opinion, so I'll be sharing my top 3 ways to create some bokeh in your watercolor paintings. Maybe more. Also, let me just say I am not a strict rule kind of person, but there are a few rules, you know, guidelines, let's put it that way, that I like to follow when I'm adding some bokeh to my paintings. I've mentioned this before, you know, these blurry light circles need to be lighter than the overall background, with soft edges, because you know, blurred stuff isn't really sharp. They can be randomly placed. They usually are, unless there's a specific pattern you need them to follow for some reason. They can overlap or not. They can be all different sizes, and they do need to vary in color or at the very least in value. You know, some darker, others lighter, several different values to make it more interesting and less flat, I guess. Okay, so the first technique I'm going to show you is the one I used for the Christmas painting I showed you earlier. And the way I created my bokeh then was using some masking fluid. I used a pen, you can use whichever you prefer, but keep in mind that if you choose, you know, the flask, the bottle, it will smell very bad. So anyway, what I did back then was I added a paint layer, then drew some circles, covered those circles in masking fluid, then painted a second paint layer, then added some more circles, then I then covered in masking fluid. You know what? Just watch that video after you're done with this one, okay? It's all there. So, and this is kind of what I have right here. I have drawn some circles. I have outlined them with some masking fluid. This is the only one I covered completely. The others aren't covered, so I can't just wash it all with paint. I need to be somewhat careful, but you know, I don't need to be very careful to do it because I have these lines right here that are protecting my circles. So the pros to this is the circles are really well protected, right? Especially if you cover all of them. You can paint, you know, those layers over them, no problem whatsoever. The paint won't get into the circles no matter what you do. If I paint here, I won't be smudging it with paint. I am pretty sure about that. We can do wet on wet, some really cool color blends for the background. And if you're looking for a white bokeh, you've got it. See, I don't need to be very careful because I'm painting around it because this is covered, completely covered. So I am very good. No worries. So here we are doing the lazy version, okay? We're just adding, we're keeping our circles white, and we are just adding one layer of paint because we don't want to, you know, waste a lot of time in this demonstration. Little blue. Cons: it does take forever because you can't add masking fluid to wet paper, you can't add paint to wet masking fluid, you can't remove masking fluid that's wet or when the paper around it is wet because it smudges everything, and we can't use a heat gun or a hairdryer on masking fluid because it ruins the whole thing. So, you know, we do a lot of waiting. And then you paint your layers, and after your circles are done and everything is just dry, you remove your masking fluid. And you can just go ahead and dampen those circles and slightly pull some color from your background to add some soft, light color to those circles instead of adding layers and layers and layers of paint to your painting one at a time and having to wait all that time. Soft pink, so soft pink too. And we go back to drawing some paint from our background. Yeah, just like that. And this is what you get, just like the one I did for Christmas. Or maybe you can add a really light, really watery color to each circle if you're looking for different colors than the ones in your background. So, you know, just a time-saving tip for you. But I have to say, this technique, even if it does take a lot of time, is just a lot of fun. It really is. Now, of course, another way to do this whole thing, if you trust your painting skills, would be to draw your circles and then just paint around them. You know, no protection. Just a lot of skill and attention as you paint. Now, the pros being, it saves you time, of course, and masking fluid. The con being, you need to be really careful. And for me, that is not the way I enjoy painting. You know, imagine a painting filled with teeny tiny dots of blurred lights and having to painstakingly paint all around them. Some areas with a detail brush because there's just no room for a bigger brush. And if you go over that circle line, it's game over. Plus, I do think this is the way that gets us the harder edges of all three. So you'll need to work on those after. And it also gets the wonkiest circles, you know, at least for me. Now, my third method, which I think is my favorite so far, is doing some lifting. Lifting in watercolors, if you've never heard of it, is just removing paint from the paper. The pros being it's quick, fun and inexpensive to do, and it also gives you the softer edges of the bunch. The cons being it can ruin your paper if you overdo it or if your paper is not very good. So essentially what you do is you add a layer of paint to your painting and then you just lift off some circles of paint as you want. Then you wait for it to dry before adding another layer, or you know, you can just paint after that if you want to have different color values in your bokeh. If it's different colors you're looking for, just add a light coat of watered down paint to each circle and you're done. So in this corner I have some dry paint I painted earlier, and in this one I'm going to be adding a wet layer of paint. Wet paint, dry paint. So how do we lift while the paint is wet? Several options really. First, there's a dry brush. You just go over it. You can do your own circle of course, but I much prefer following. So we just keep making sure the brush is nice and dry. We do it like this, and then we can also go back and dry it. So there's one. You can also do it with some paper towel, but if you want your circles to be nice and perfect, you may want to use some sort of template. You know, it won't be much of a flat circle. I mean, you can somewhat, yeah, it's not that bad, but when you compare it to others, when you compare it to the other circles, it's not that great either, is it? So, what we can do to make sure our circles are nice and perfect is get something flat, like a coin or this button to do it. So what we do here is we get our button, we put it inside our paper, nice and flat, you see? And then we just do like that. Look at that. Much, much easier to do. Look at that, guys. How easy, how easier is this one to do. Now, for dry paint, we need to use a wet brush. The exact same brush, except we use it while wet. You can draw your circles with a template like a stencil, or you know, even this, depending on the size you're looking for, or you can just draw some circles, you know, freehand before lifting. Let's do here our darkest bit. Ooh. See, the darker the better actually, the more difference you'll see. And that's why we always finish our bokeh with a very dark layer, okay? So we can see the difference clearly. That's the whole point of doing this. Just keep at it. And it starts to appear. Personally, I love this effect. If I did it, you know, it is the most subtle bokeh, which I think is actually the most natural looking one, and I absolutely love this method. So there you go, some dry paint bokeh. You can also use a magic eraser, like the one I showed you a couple of videos ago. I don't think I have one right now, but you know, I'll just link you to that video so you can check it out. It really is magical, let me tell you. The way it erases watercolor, it's like nothing I've ever seen. Now keep in mind, this is probably the one method that's most likely to damage your paper if you're not careful. And guess what? I am doing a bonus one, an extra technique for you that's the simplest of them all. All we need to do is get clear alcohol, whichever you have on hand. It can be gin or vodka, rubbing alcohol, anything with a high content of alcohol really, like perfume. You can even do this with clear dishwasher fluid. Yeah, that works. Whatever you prefer. The pros being it's quick, easy and fun. The cons being... let me show you the cons. Can you see it? You don't get a clear result. Not quite as the other ones. If you want a white bokeh, this one is out of the question. If you don't mind, if you're looking for, you know, different tones of the same color, then I think this may work very well. Oh, can you see? Now, another con to this is it does not work on dry paint. See? Absolutely nothing. Nothing happens. And there you have it, guys. Pick your favorite or mix and match, you know, which I think is the best way to go about it, really. You decide how you want to create your bokeh. And of course, don't forget to go back and watch this video somewhere with a step-by-step tutorial of creating this gorgeous Christmas bokeh effect. And I will see you really, really soon. Bye-bye.